The Badlands of America. Each multicolored ribbon of land tells of a time far before ours. 75 million years of history built up layer by layer. But the elements have no respect for the past. The forces of wind and water savage the land into ever stranger shapes. It is a plastic, water-whipped world. At first glance, all seems ravaged and barren, a hostile place to live. But in between towering pinnacles, the elements have carved out rich grassland arenas full of life. This cast of characters shapes the land, too, in its own way. But while this extraordinary landscape changes slowly over time, they must move fast. Spring and summer need to be spent wisely, because neither will last. Late winter in the Badlands. Temperatures nudge just above freezing. Could this be the arrival of spring? Black-tailed prairie dogs stir from the shelter of their underground burrows to enjoy the new hint of warmth. Thousands of tiny tunnelers live in this prairie dog town. Most of them are related. But each, too, has a family of its own, called a coterie, and a set of burrows in which they hunker down together at night. At this time of year, though, they aren't just used for sleeping. The male head of each family moves underground with the females in his coterie. Hidden below, away from prying eyes, the breeding season is underway. Females that have already mated are busy gathering nest materials. Sisters, aunts, and cousins work together. It's normally happy families around here. But not now. Each female needs a nursery burrow of her own, and she will fight to get one. It's showdown in Dogtown. The females furnish their nests just in time. Winter isn't ready to give way to spring. The death throes of the season can be brutal. The prairie dogs retreat underground. Like ghosts from a time when tens of millions of giants roamed across America, bison plow through the snow above. The Badlands is one of the few places where these iconic animals still roam free. They are too huge to find shelter. But their very size, wrapped in thick winter coats, protects them and any unborn young. The bison mated in late summer so their calves would be born in the spring. If the females give birth now, the young may freeze to death. Life is a constant gamble in a place where nighttime temperatures can stay below freezing for 5 months of the year. The Lakota Native Americans knew of its dangers and called it Makosika, Badlands. When this land is frozen, it's at its most inhospitable. Food is never more scarce than now. Pregnant prairie dogs leave the shelter of their underground burrows to search for what little grass remains. Like grizzled prospectors, they survive off the land, but it's tough going. They must rely on body fat built up the previous summer to keep them and their unborn pups alive. If the cold retreats and the grass returns by the time their pups are born, they will be able to produce rich milk on which to feed them. If not, their pups could starve. Most plants in the Badlands died months ago from freezing ice, their nutrients retreating into their roots. But the increasing warmth of the sun begins to transform this frozen world. Ice and snow finally weaken their grasp on the land. The meltwater sculpts away layers of land vivid with color. Red iron oxide and purple manganese cut through the landscape. Here, there's more than one little house on the prairie. Hundreds, in fact. Down in Dogtown, prairie dogs use the soft, wet soil to shape the land for themselves. They aren't always starting a burrow from scratch. Some excavations are over 100 years old. A period property that needs just a little TLC. In the coming summer, they will use the burrows for shade. But for now, they shelter the newly born pups. The young won't venture into the outside world for weeks, so keeping the ranch in good repair is essential. The first blossoms of the season. Confirmation that spring is here. The days push back the dark, and evening primroses bloom. The prairie sunflower seeks out the increasing light. The sound of the meadowlark fills the air as turkey vultures arrive for the change in season. For a few frantic months, avian parents will try to make the most of the long, warm days to hunt for food for them and their chicks. The new arrivals haven't even mated yet, let alone laid or hatched their eggs. One early bird has already done all three, the golden eagle. As a resident, the eagle gambled on surviving the bitter winter and started breeding months ago, high on the cliffs, overlooking Dogtown. The gamble has paid off. Its two chicks survived the late snows. But they may not survive each other. The mother looks on while her eldest, largest chick attacks the other. Like the biblical Cain and Abel, the older sibling is going to kill the younger. If it succeeds, then it will have less competition for the food its mother brings to the nest. It's a selfish, brutal way to ensure that it gains the size and strength needed to grow to independence. For the next few weeks, the prairie dog pups will remain safely hidden underground while their parents scout for trouble. The large mounds at burrow entrances make excellent lookout posts. The Badlands is a dangerous place for prairie dogs. While they live off the land, many others live off them. A coyote. United against their enemy, the town sounds an alarm. Different speeds of call broadcast the level of danger, how fast a predator is approaching, if it's on the attack. The coyote is stripped of any element of surprise. But coyotes aren't the biggest of the animals that wander into town in search of food. The bison calves were born safely after the snows. Their arrival timed carefully with growth of fresh, new grass. They've come to Dogtown for its well-tended pastures. These little critters are constant gardeners, clipping the grass short so predators can't spring an ambush, and encouraging new growth. Their busy burrowing has redistributed minerals in the soil, which makes for a nutritious feeding ground for growing calves. And mothers shedding their winter coats. Right now, the Badlands is a boom town. It's bustling with new arrivals, eager to exploit, scavenge, and steal what they can from the prairie dog clans. A drifter arrives from out of town. A burrowing owl. Not that it does much burrowing. Instead of tunneling out a burrow of its own, it prefers to break and enter, and then redecorate. This is bison dung. It's decorating of a different kind. And it isn't just bison dung. Some old coyote droppings, too, help to add a sense of je ne sais quoi. By scattering dung around the burrow entrance, the owl lures in its prey. Dung beetles and other insects. More than enough for a burrowing owl. And a mate. There may be another reason for the home improvements. A hungry badger. Dung could disguise the smell of the owl burrow from the badger that set up home nearby. She's left her cub underground and is on the hunt. If she can't sniff out an owl burrow, then a prairie dog will do just as nicely. Predators much larger than badgers once roamed the Badlands. Fossils of saber-toothed tigers lie embedded in the rock. But the multicolored ribbons of land that thread through this earth tell of times before theirs. "75 million years of history build up layer upon layer. Solidified deep-sea mud from a time when waters once blotted out the light. Sediment from great rivers. Thick ash from volcanic eruptions. Each age laid down a different colored band of rock. A landscape deposited into existence, bit by bit. But 500,000 years ago, creation turned to destruction. Rivers and rain began to sculpt the soft bands of earth, revealing layers of history buried in the mud. The delicate skeleton of ancient worlds remains. Constantly eroded by the elements, it's thought that in another 500,000 years, the Badlands will be gone. But the prairie dog town could be gone far sooner. 200 years ago, there were over 5 billion prairie dogs across the Americas. The Lakota Native Americans lived peacefully alongside them. But then pioneers moved west and saw them as pests. Ranchers have hunted them down in their billions. Today, just 2% of their original numbers remain. And there's a hidden disease that could wipe them out entirely. Plague. But for now, there's another, more immediate danger. A rattlesnake lurks in wait. This time, there's no sounding of the prairie dog alarm. The mother has pups underground. She must not let the snake out of her sight. Slowly, she lures it away from her burrow. The snake loses interest, but not its appetite. It chooses another burrow. This brave mother is all that stands between the snake and her pups. Steadfast, she blocks the entrance and stands her ground. A litter of prairie dog pups would make a welcome meal. There seems little hope. But then the snake moves on, perhaps deterred by the mother's sharp claws and teeth. There's no one home to guard the neighbor's pups. A certain sign that summer is here. The arrival of cliff swallows. They've traveled thousands of kilometers from South America in order to make the most of the insects here and the long summer days in which to catch them. Last year's nest saved them the work of rebuilding. But there's a problem. They're already occupied. These insects aren't food for the swallows. The swallows are food for them. Blood-sucking parasites, known as swallow bugs. They mass on nest entrances, waiting to feed. The swallows can't take the risk. They need to rebuild an entire nest colony from scratch. A huge amount of work. They must find a new site and build new nests, and fast, because summer will be short. But they can't do anything without mud, and for that, they need a bit of rain. They might not have long to wait. In the brief darkness of a summer's night, a nocturnal courtship begins. These silent sparks of light are fireflies. While much of Dogtown sleeps, their mating dance bespangles the sky. But the sky itself is not to be outdone. It stages a light show of its own. The night storm passes without releasing a single drop of rain. The clouds clear, revealing the stars in all their shining glory. The summer sun begins to heat the land. The burrowing owls must spend their time wisely. If their chicks are to hatch when insect life is busiest, and fledge in time to make the winter journey south. Picking the right time to mate is a bit of a balancing act. There are others who have given their young a far greater head start to summer. And Dogtown is about to get real busy. After 6 weeks underground, the pups finally make their entrance. They've been nursed on milk till now, and it's time they learn to feed themselves. After so long in a burrow, this must feel good. The pups need to grow fast if they are to be plump enough to survive their first winter freeze. But that's weeks off. There are more imminent dangers that may have to be faced. There's a hidden enemy lurking in the grasslands. Plague. It's carried by an almost invisible army of fleas that feed on prairie dog blood. It hasn't reached this Dogtown yet, but if it does, it could wipe out not just the young, but the entire town in less than 2 weeks. High above Dogtown, our golden eagle nest is empty. The chick has killed its sibling and fledged, but ventured only as far as a nearby ridge. For weeks, it's gorged on enough food for 2 chicks. Now, building up its wing muscles, it trains for flight. It needs to make the leap soon if it's to make the most of the prairie dog pups, but it's poised to be a new threat in the skies above the Badlands. There is a Native American god known as Wakia, an eagle-like bird that inhabits mountain peaks high above its hunting ground. When it beats its wings, the winds come. When it speaks, it has the voice of thunder. From its eyes comes lightning. From its feathers falls rain. This time, the storm doesn't disappoint. It's the moment the cliff swallows have been waiting for. The rain has changed the shape of the Badlands. Now the swallows can use the softened mud to make changes of their own. It's nest building time. Using fresh mud, they begin to mold new homes. Pellet by pellet, they build up the walls, which quickly dry in the baking sun. They shake the mud to remove any air and ensure fewer cracks once it dries. It could take over 1,000 beakfuls to make a home, and several days. But each one is bug-free and ready to breed in. For the few brief months of summer, the Badlands are rich with provisions for those who know where to look. The resident badger leaves her cub in the safety of its burrow while she goes out to hunt. A mother sounds the alarm, and her offspring run for cover. The badger's too big to fit in a prairie dog burrow. But she can dig. The deeper the burrow, however, the harder it is for her to dig out her prey. This one is more than a meter underground. Too deep. Time for a different tactic. She must remain unnoticed if she is to catch a prairie dog above ground. 3-month-old cub waits to be fed. This prairie dog will feed them both, for today at least. If her cub is to grow strong enough to survive the approaching winter, then she will need to hunt for plenty more. As for all parents here, the battle to keep their offspring alive means making the most of summer's riches. Our cliff swallows use the long daylight hours to catch insects for their newly hatched young. While down on the prairie, a very different bird raises young of her own. For weeks, the burrowing owls have incubated and fed their chicks underground. The time has come to lure them into the light. The oddballs are different to most other owls. They will learn to hunt by day and spend much of their time on the ground. From the dark of the burrow, the chicks emerge one by one until all the brood is on the surface. A magnificent 7. Howdy owls is what cowboys used to call these little fellows, because they seemed to nod hello as the men rode past. They are certainly a strange sight. Long-legged balls of fluff that learn to run before they can fly. Their neighbors, too, are having a few life lessons. Learning how to get along in Dogtown. All the pups in the family join together to play. Within a couple of years, the females will be fighting their sisters for nursery burrows. And the males will have already left to start families of their own. But for now, the fighting is just play. And the neighborhood is one giant crush. Late evening, and most of the town is sleeping. The air is free from the calls of prairie dogs. But silence doesn't always mean peace. A black-footed ferret is on the hunt. To see one of these critters is incredibly rare. It's one of the most endangered mammals in North America. Numbers were once so low it was thought extinct. Plague hit it hard, but it was in trouble way before that, as populations of its main source of prey plummeted. Prairie dogs. With eye patches like a bandit, it launches a raid on Dogtown. Using the cover of darkness, it sneaks into a burrow. It's the perfect fit. It will feed on over 100 prairie dogs a year, as long as there are hundreds of prairie dogs in Dogtown. The next morning, a distant thunder rumbles across the prairie. But there will be no rain. It's the sound of a herd of bison moving into Dogtown. There's something here they need. For once, it's not grass. At this time of year, the giants are itchy with insects. The tiny tunnelers can provide relief. A byproduct of their burrowing underground now lies spread across the surface: dust. A dust bath can shake off unwanted pests and give a good scratch. Time to rock and roll in Dogtown. Many of the Badlanders rely upon these little critters, like the pronghorn, drawn to feed on the grass they tend. They might be small, just 1.5 kilograms at most, but the prairie dogs are heavy hitters when it comes to providing a way of life in the Badlands. Without them, many animals would have a hard time surviving. The heat of the summer continues to rise. It's over 40 degrees Celsius. It's hard to imagine these sun-baked, water-parched lands covered in snow and ice. But for the animals of the Badlands, the battle to beat winter is well underway. The cliff swallows head up and move out. Theirs is a long migration south. They must leave while the sun is still high in the sky. Male bison prepare for the rut. They taste the air for signs of a willing female and fight for the right to mate. Injuries are brutal, and there isn't much time to heal before the cold sets in. But for many of the residents of Dogtown, there is a far greater risk than winter. 3/4 of the neighboring dog towns have been wiped out by plague. The victims died underground, leaving no trace. If the fleas that spread it reach here, then the results could be devastating. Not only for the prairie dogs, but for the many species that live around the town. If Dogtown disappears, the risk is they do too. But there is hope. Teams of biologists and locals are challenging the invader and the fleas that carry it. Spraying burrows with insecticide dust, they move across the town one entrance at a time, ensuring countless fleas bite the dust. It's laborious work. 500,000 burrows in 40 square kilometers have already been dusted. These flea fighters are the town's best chance of survival. The final days of summer. Time to make the most of the end of season grass. Time to stock up for the icy winter ahead. The prairie dogs and the animals that live off them and their land have survived another year. Industrious parents have taken great risks to give their young a good start in life. Soon, the animals that stay will have to find what shelter they can from the cold, while summer visitors drift away. The boomtown will be a ghost town. At least until the spring sunshine returns to the Badlands again.